A 13-foot fiberglass skiff built in 1986 is listed right now for $17,000 in Brady, Texas. At least, that is what everyone assumed, until the same hull started asking $20,000 and $21,000 on the national boards, while dealers quietly ran out of anything clean and used under $15,000. New powerboat sales fell 8 to 10% last year. Used inventory went dry. 7 boats are appreciating because of it, and number 1 costs $7,995 brand new. The reason those 7 are climbing is not the reason you would expect. It has very little to do with the boats themselves. What that means for your money is fairly direct. If you own one of the 7, the trade-in number a dealer offers you this summer is probably wrong by $5,000 to $10,000 in your favor. If you are shopping, the window on all 7 is closing at different speeds. One of them has already closed for anyone who wants a good one. In Charleston, South Carolina, a dealer currently has a 1968 Boston Whaler 17 Montauk sitting on the lot at $19,500, not a private seller in a driveway. A licensed marine dealer with a 58-year-old boat taking up floor space that a new boat is supposed to occupy. That is a business decision made on a spreadsheet. Every boat on this list has a clean running example somewhere in the country right now for under $15,000. That is the rule for getting on the list. Miss the number, miss the list. We are counting down to number 1, and number 1 is the smallest boat here. Number 7, $7,990. That is what the cheapest Lund 1650 on the national boards is asking. The average asking price across that same model line is $28,900. That is 170 listings, and the oldest hull in the group was built in 1994. A new 1650 Rebel sitting on a dealer lot in Norwich, Connecticut is priced at $35,219. The top of the range hits $45,725. Same length, same aluminum, same lakes, and roughly 4 times the price. The listing boards describe used Lunds in good condition as sensible candidates for repowering, which is the tell. Nobody repowers a boat they consider disposable. Aluminum fishing boats, personal watercraft, and small trailerables now account for more than 90% of retail unit activity in American boating. Freshwater fishing boats alone held steady at roughly 53,000 units. That is the volume end of the market, and the volume end is where the shortage bites first. For a buyer, that means the sub-$8,000 Lund is no longer a starter boat you outgrow. It is the same boat as the $35,000 one, minus the screens. The Alumacraft version of this story is cheaper and moving the same direction. The V16 starts at $4,495 and averages $6,295. Pay attention to that gap, because it explains everything that happens further up this list. Number 6, $3,850 buys the cheapest correct craft ski Nautique in the country. The most expensive one on the same page is $104,950. 25 listings, going back to a 1978. Average asking price across all of them is $11,299, which means the classic hulls are dragging the whole line down toward affordable, and buyers have noticed. In Danville, California, there is a 1979 ski Nautique, one owner, garaged its entire life, never in salt water, with a brand new Ford 351 Marine engine showing 5 hours. $13,500. A new drivetrain in a 47-year-old hull. The price is tracking the engine, not the paperwork. That is the thing about the direct drive inboards from this era. The hull does not wear out, the engine is a small block that any competent shop can rebuild, and the parts are still on shelves. A consumable engine bolted into a permanent shell. A 1982 Ski Nautique in Cherryville, North Carolina is asking $7,000. A 1996 is asking $15,900. A 1995 with 710 hours on it is listed in Seattle at $8,200. The older boat is barely the cheaper boat anymore, and 2 years ago it was. For a buyer, the payoff is simple. You are buying a hull and a rebuildable engine for less than the sales tax on a new one. Hold that idea about rebuildable, because number 1 takes it further than any boat on this list. Number 1 has almost nothing on it that can be rebuilt, and that is exactly why it costs more than it did new. Now, the dealers. In April, 67% of American boat dealers reported that their new boat inventory was too high. In the same survey, 60% said their used inventory was too low. Only 21% said they had too much used stock. That is a lot to have too much of one thing and not enough of the other at the same time. By June, the picture had barely moved. 54% still called new inventory too high, and only 12% called it too low. One dealer put it plainly in the survey comments, saying entry-level boats have gotten too expensive, which leaves those buyers shopping quality used instead. The same dealer described 3 straight strong months on used boats. So the first answer is scarcity. Dealers are hunting used inventory because they do not have any, and the 7 boats on this list are the used inventory that sells fastest. That is true. It is also only part of it. Number 5. The floor on a MasterCraft 190 ProStar sits at $8,750, and every one currently listed was built in 1987 or later. 14 listings on the board, average asking price of $10,900. At the other end of the same model line, a current ProStar tops out at $189,817. That is not a typo, by the way. The gap between the cheapest ProStar and the most expensive ProStar is roughly a house. The 190 was built as a slalom boat, which on this line means a flat wake and a direct drive. That was a limitation in 2005. It is a feature now, because a boat with no ballast tanks has no ballast tanks to fail. Widen the search to the whole MasterCraft 190 line and the floor drops to $5,000 across 17 listings, same 1987 starting year, same average of $10,900. The cheap end of that line usually just means a seller who has not looked at the board lately. The buyer payoff is the drivetrain. A direct drive small block is a known quantity with a known rebuild cost, which is the opposite of what you inherit when you buy a modern boat with an integrated ballast system. Number 4. $7,500 gets you into a Grady white Seafarer. The average asking price for the same model is $26,995. 21 listings, oldest built in 1987, top of the range $51,500. The Seafarer runs Grady White's CV2 hull. The design the builder still puts on boats, costing 6 figures. It is a 22-foot offshore boat available for less than a used pickup. The newer Seafarer, the 228, does not play the same game. Those start at $38,900. Same builder, same name on the hull side, roughly 5 times the entry price, and what separates the two numbers is which year the mold was running. The catch on the older boat is honest and worth saying out loud. At $7,500, you are buying a hull and inheriting an engine question. A repower on a boat this size is a real number, often more than the boat, and repower demand is exactly what dealers say is keeping their service bays full this year. Which is the part that gets missed. The service bay is where the second answer lives. None of that explains the prices, though. Scarcity alone would raise a boat to its old level and stop there. These 7 have gone past it. Before the last 3, one thing worth knowing. Average powerboat prices in North America rose 5.1% in 2025 to $184,702. That is the average. Not the luxury tier, the average. At the same time, new powerboat unit sales fell 8 to 10%, and pre-owned boats now account for roughly 80% of all annual unit sales in the country. So the new boat business shrank. The price of a new boat went up, and 4 out of every 5 boats that changed hands last year were already used. A dealer floor planning new inventory at 6.49% interest is paying to store boats that are not moving, while the boats that are moving are the ones he has to go find. That is why he wants yours back, because it turns. If you want more of this, subscribing genuinely helps the channel keep pulling these numbers. Back to the countdown, and the 3 boats where the effect is strongest. Number 3. $9,995 is the cheapest Mako 20 center console listed in America, and there are only 3 of them on the entire national board. The oldest dates to 1973, the newest to 1988, the average asking price $13,000, top of the range $20,000. 3 listings for a hull Mako kept in production across 15 model years. A new Mako 17, which is a smaller and simpler boat, averages $29,615 today. So the cheapest classic 20-footer in the country asks about a third of what the average new 17-footer does, and the 17 is a skiff. These are heavy hulls with a deep V up front, the kind that punishes you in a chop and gets you home anyway. Heavy is why they are still here, 53 years after the oldest one left the factory. For a buyer, 3 listings nationwide is the number that matters. Scarcity in a model with a following does not correct downward. Number 1 has the opposite problem, and it is worse. There are 23 of them listed nationwide, which sounds healthy until you learn what the new equivalent costs. Number 2. Boston Whaler 17 Montauks start at $7,000 and run to $66,805. 27 listings. The oldest was built in 1968, the newest is a 2026, and the average across all of them is $17,500. Remember the Charleston dealer, whose listing puts a 1968 under the Montauk name at $19,500. Now put that next to a new 17 Montauk in Port Charlotte, Florida at $54,994. Same model name, same twin sponson hull concept, 58 years apart and a factor of about 2.8 in price. The Montauk is a squared-off bow, twin sponsons, and a hull filled with foam rather than framed around a wooden skeleton. It plans on a small engine, which in a market where a new outboard is its own second boat payment matters more than the badge does. The buyer payoff on a Montauk is the repower ceiling. Because the hull is rated for modest horsepower, the engine you eventually hang on it costs a fraction of what a modern center console needs. A 90 horsepower four-stroke on a boat that is happy with it is a very different ownership cost than a 300 horsepower rig on a boat that demands one. Over 10 years, that one specification is worth more than the hull. One more thing about that Montauk board before the reveal, because it is the tell. A dealer in South Carolina is asking $19,500 for a 1968. A dealer in Florida is asking $54,994 for a 2024. Both are dealers, both are pricing to move inventory. Neither of them is being sentimental about a boat. Look at the ages on that board one more time. 1968 at the bottom, 2026 at the top, and the average sitting at $17,500. On almost any other durable good in America, a 58-year-old example and a brand new one do not appear in the same price conversation. On this list they do, on all 7 of them, which is the signal that the explanation is not about any individual boat. It is not scarcity, and it is not nostalgia, it is replacement cost. Every boat on this list shares one trait. There is no new boat being built today that does the same job at the same price. The old hull's ceiling is set by whatever the closest new equivalent costs, and the average new powerboat climbed again last year. When the new boat goes to $54,000, the old boat does not stay at $7,000. That is the floor under all of it, and the word for it is substitution. Number 1. $3,000 is the cheapest Boston Whaler 13 listed in the country today. The most expensive is $20,000, and the 13 Sport version tops out at $21,000. 23 listings, 22 of them used, going back to a 1964. The number that puts this at the top of the list comes from 2000, when Boston Whaler introduced a new 13-footer priced at $7,995 engine and trailer included, $7,995 for the whole rig, 26 years ago. Today, the average asking price for a used 13 is $9,200. The 13 Sport averages $8,995, and the 1986, sitting in Brady, Texas, is at $17,000, which is where this started. The closest thing Boston Whaler builds now is the 130 Super Sport, and a used 2014 example is listed at $10,500. The hull is the reason. Closed cell foam poured between 2 layers of fiberglass, filling every void, which is why the company famously cut one in half and both pieces floated. A restored 1958 Sport in Freeport, Texas is asking $13,500. A fully restored 1979 in Weston, Florida is at $9,995 with a new engine. Restoration shops do not do that twice unless the numbers come back in their favor, which leaves the question of who this lands on. The winners are the people already holding a clean example of any of these 7. Your boat has stopped depreciating and started being scarce, and a dealer who needs used inventory will take it in on trade at a number he sets, unless you make him. On a Montauk, that gap is worth roughly $10,500. The losers are the buyers who wait. 3 Mako 20s nationwide is what a closed window looks like, and nobody rings a bell when a model runs out. The second group of losers is quieter. Anyone who financed near the average new boat price of $184,702 is watching the exact opposite math run against them, on a hull with 1,000 things to break. So the takeaway you can use this week is the 3-number check. Pull the cheapest listing for your model, pull the average asking price, and then pull the price of the closest thing being built new in 2026. 3 numbers, about 15 minutes of work. If the new equivalent is more than double the used average, your boat has a floor under it, and the trade-in figure a dealer quotes you is an opening offer. Write all 3 down before you walk onto a lot, because the conversation changes the moment you can quote the middle number back. That check is the first thing inside the complete boat buying guide, $27 at fleetwatchmanual.com. It walks you through the model by model numbers and the exact questions that stop a dealer from setting your trade value for you. The same math is now running in reverse on late model boats, the ones bought new between 2021 and 2023, and that story is on screen now. The strange part is that none of this was a plan. Nobody set out to make a 1964 skiff a store of value. New boats simply got expensive enough, for long enough, that the old ones stopped being old,